Hey guys, I'm Kevin,
I'm Jake.
and this is Movie Matters. Today we're talking about the 1984 film Blood Simple, the Coen Brothers directorial debut. Jake, you just got done watching it. Tell me your thoughts.
Yeah, fresh off watching the movie. Yeah, I liked it. It's like the typical Coen Brothers kind of people getting way in over their heads in some sort of criminal activity. Probably 75% of their movies are this kind of plot line. But they're all great, so there's not much to complain about with this movie. You can see elements of all their future movies in this. It's just maybe not as fine-tuned, as their later movies are, but it's still a pretty great movie.
What's funny is they say, looking back at this movie, they're like, this is the worst movie we've ever made.
Yeah. I mean, but that's saying
I think
something,
it's so good. I love it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very well-made movie, but yeah, it's probably their worst movie.
I don't know. I haven't seen their entire filmography. I've seen a good chunk, but I wouldn't even say, I wouldn't even know how to categorize their movies as from bad to good. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean it's yeah, it's hard, and some of their movies, don't fit this genre of the crime kind of genre. Oh Brother Where Art Thou is a goofy it's almost like an epic parody in a lot of ways, but is also kind of serious. I mean, it's a fantastic movie. If anyone has not seen it, I highly recommend that movie as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, their whole catalog is just so it's pretty wide ranging.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure we have to watch their next movie that was made in the 80s, which is Raising Arizona.
Oh, Raising Arizona, yeah. Miller's Crossing.
That movie is
the 90s.
Unbelievably good. It's so funny. And the total opposite of this movie.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'm just surprised that they say this is their worst movie, because this movie's awesome. So, for context, I've seen it before. I've watched it. I bought it on the Criterion Collection Blu-ray, which looks incredible, by the way. And it's just Blu-ray, not even 4K. So it looked awesome. And Jake, this is the first time you've seen it, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Yeah. So I really enjoyed it my first viewing. This viewing, I dissected it a lot more, and what stuck out to me the most is the camera work, and the transitions are just fucking awesome in this movie.
Yeah.
And we'll get into those in a bit, but this movie, I mean, with this being their first film, it was hard for them to get it off the ground. Apparently, I mean, they were friends with Sam Raimi, who did Evil Dead, and pretty much all the Evil Deads. On the advice of Sam Raimi, the Coen brothers went door to door to potential investors, showing a 2-minute trailer of the movie, trying to get them to invest. And from that, they raised $750,000, which is pretty awesome considering, in 84, that's a lot of money. And that made them be able to make the movie, which is pretty impressive. They finished the film and brought it to LA to show it to major studios, and pretty much every single major studio passed on the film. Then later that year, they applied to the New York Film Festival, which they got in, and they then showed it at the Toronto Film Festival, where a deal was made with Circle Films to distribute the movie domestically. So they finally, it took a while to get them kind of going, which is interesting. You think of the Coen Brothers now, and it's like they're actually like split up now. I don't know if you know that they like don't make movies together anymore.
I did notice that the last few only had one of them as director listed and not both. Or sometimes it'll be one wrote it and one directs it. But the past like couple, it's kind of been one of them's been missing.
Yeah. Like this movie, I mean, when it ends, it says directed by Joel Coen.
Yeah.
So, this is there's a lot of our 80s actors we like in this movie. This is the film debut of Frances McDormand, who she actually is married to Joel Coen. And this is the movie they first met on when she auditioned to play the role of Abby, which is pretty interesting. They married like right after the release of the film. So, she's great in this. You've got Emmett Walsh, who's awesome, who we will get to in Blade Runner coming up. Spoiler alert: we are going to do Blade Runner coming next month. Mm-hmm. He is awesome in this movie as the private detective with technically no name. His name is never said in the movie.
Yeah.
But apparently in the script, his name is Lauren Visser, and you can see his name is engraved on the Zippo lighter. Mm-hmm. And also engraved on the lighter is Elk's Man of the Year, which is interesting. There's a lot of cool little like details of like things left behind in this movie that show up later, or are the reason a character goes back, or there's like one object that's the through line for the movie, and that's Abby's gun, and I'll touch on that more later.
And this is like a trope in a lot of their like crime movies, is that like either like imperfect heroes kind of fall into some sort of criminal enterprise, or some sort of bad deal gone wrong, or whatever the case is, and then the criminals that kind of are either after the hero or the hero himself like keep making mistakes that keep causing chaos and like escalating the situation. Which is like we obviously talk about stakes in like every episode now, but like that's how you really pump up like the tension and ramp up the action in a crime movie, is by forcing more and more chaos until some sort of big epic conclusion, which is how a lot of their movies end in just like total like absolute chaos, or like everybody gets killed, or like whatever. Like there's something like bonkers happens usually in their movies at the end. So, and
they just like end, which is interesting. Like this one kind of just ends.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like it's resolved, but it's not really resolved. I mean, it's interesting. They do that a lot with their movies, which I like. I don't know. I think that's cool. It like leaves a lot to the interpretation and the imagination, which is good storytelling and filmmaking, in my opinion, at least. But yeah, great point. They raise the stakes. It's just like one thing leads to another, where one character thinks this is what's happening, but it's not, and then it leads to the other character. Like it just keeps, like you said, keeps escalating because of all these misinterpretations and miscommunications.
Yeah,
and it's really intense. There's some intense scenes in this movie that are thrilling and great. And again, great filmmaking and great cinematography. Barry Sonnenfeld did the cinematography for this movie. You may know him from the Men in Black trilogy. He directed them.
Okay.
He's directed a couple other movies. There's one of my guilty pleasures that I highly recommend, Jake, if you haven't seen it, and for our listeners and viewers, if you haven't seen it. There's a movie called Big Trouble that came out in the early 2000s that it was very under the radar, got overlooked. It was like right around 9/11, like the September 11th attacks, and the movie's about a bomb on a plane, kind of. So it got swept under the rug. But it's such an underrated movie that's so good. Did we ever watch that, Big Trouble?
No, but it sounds familiar.
Allen, Tim Allen. I mean, the cast is stacked. It's got like Tom Sizemore, Rene Russo, Johnny Knoxville, Stanley Tucci, Dennis Farina is in it, who we love from Midnight Run and Snatch. But speaking of other 80s players in this movie, we've got Dan Hedaya, who, Jake, do you remember what he's in?
No, but once you say it, it'll click.
Commando.
Oh yeah,
He's
that's
the
right.
like wannabe he like wants to be president of Valverde.
Yeah, that's right.
I forget his name in that movie, but he's hilarious because he plays like he's kind of that like one guy that's like plays every different type of like race in all the movies. Like he could play like a like a Spanish drug lord. He could like in this he's kind of like he's like Greek. Like, which brings me to an awesome kind of little like monologue he has where he's like, do you know what happens in Greece when a messenger comes with bad news? It's like, we cut the messenger's head off. We kill the messenger, which is awesome. It's like, like, why do they do that? It's like to feel better. It's like such a cool little like opening to his character.
Yeah.
I again, the acting's super good in this movie. According to the cinematographer Barry Sonnenfeld, Frances McDormand was rarely shown storyboards because apparently the storyboard artist had a tendency to draw her character nude in all the storyboards. So the Coen Brothers, and like no one asked him to draw her nude. He just did, which is really fucking weird and creepy.
Yeah.
And so like the Coen Brothers and Barry Sonnenfeld were like, we're not showing you any of this. This is fucked up. I mean, like nowadays that guy would be fucking canceled. Like,
Yeah.
oh, very weird though. Very strange that he would do that. That's creepy. Definitely creepy. Also, we have another 80s guy. The main guy, Ray, John Getz. Do you remember what he's from? I know I'm testing you. Oh,
Yeah,
come on.
I'm failing.
The Fly.
Oh, yeah.
Gets his hand melted. He's the guy who's like in love with Gina Davis's character.
Yeah, that's right.
Which, to be frank, so is Goldblum, Jeff Goldblum's character.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I like the story. Story's great. It's a quick 95-minute movie. I like the tension with Dan Hedaya's character, Julian Marty. He escalates a lot of the situations where like he first goes over to Ray John Getz's house and like tries to like hurt Frances McDormand's character Abby, and like she kicks him in the balls and he throws up.
Yeah.
And then he like gets in his car and the dog jumps in the car, which is a cool shot, and he drives the wrong way. And they're like, I want to see his face when he like hits the dead end. It's like,
and, like
super funny.
You know, he like limps away, both like figuratively and like actually limps away.
Yeah.
And that's when he kind of like crawls back to the PI and asks for the hit, you know, to be done on them. But I really liked that setup, because it's not like he tried to handle it himself, and like he's kind of not that bad enough of a person to like handle it himself. And like that's kind of like the, like you said, like there's a lot of through lines in the movie, and a lot of the characters are like just not quite bad enough to finish like any of the particular crimes, you know.
And it's kind of realistic in that point. It like lends to its realism of like, you know, you have You have him getting kicked in the nuts and throwing up, which is real, and like you have him also almost getting sick with when the private detective Emmett Walsh says, "Oh yeah, I did it," and like shows him the picture. He's like, "I think I'm going to be sick." Like, all right, get the fuck out of
Yeah.
here. Like, you know, you have these characters doing despicable things, yet they are like repulsed by them, which is pretty interesting. Which I love the scene in the Volkswagen Beetle where he goes to where Julian Marty, Dan Hidea's character, goes to ask the private detective or private investigator to kill them, and it's like that beautiful shot. And Emmett Walsh's character, and this is so kind of goofy. He's just like, ha ha, you know, this lady just asked me for a marijuana cigarette, ha ha,
Yeah.
like, and like goes into his car and then like has this little like hanging like doll that he
Yeah.
pulls that like lights up its tits. But like the shot in that where they're like overlooking some like canyon is just like gorgeous.
Yeah.
And it's just like juxtaposed with this horrible thing that this character wants to do, like telling him to kill him, and he's just in this like beautiful area. It's really well done. A lot of the car scenes are really well done, and like you could tell they're low budget a little bit. Like apparently they shot one of the car scenes in a garage and just like ran like lights by to make it seem like there's cars going by.
I was gonna say, like, the opening sequence, like the title sequence to this movie, is awesome.
Yeah.
With the rain and the oncoming traffic kind of transitions the actors' names on the screen, and it's just a really cool shot. And a unique and low budget way to produce a cool effect.
Yeah, and there's a lot, like, going back to, I know I mentioned it earlier and you just said it, like, the transitions in this movie are just so good. I feel like movies these days don't do, like, they don't do crazy cool transitions, like, very fancy transitions. It's interesting. Again, we talk about it a lot, you know, they don't make them like they used to. But, like, you know, Kubrick comes to mind with his amazing transitions. This movie, I was blown the fuck away by him. For example, like, there's a shot where Abby, Frances McDormand's character, is in the office, and like she like falls back, and it like she's gonna faint, and it transitions to her falling into her bed.
Yeah.
Which is so cool. You know, like the finger, they're like finger on the answering machine going to the finger touching the blood in the car. There's so many cool little, again, through lines. There's just a lot of like layers, and I think that adds to maybe they're doing that and like the filming style because of the multiple layers of how deep this keeps going, and getting crazy, and like literally how Dan Hedaya gets buried alive. It's just like there's so much shit that just keeps piling up. It's pretty wild.
Yeah, and like there's a lot of like juxtapositions of the like kind of absurd circumstance that they're in, and then like normal life.
Yeah.
And like a lot of the transitions kind of emphasize that, where like she's in like the chaos of like the office, like you said, and then transitions to her bed, like her like safe space, you know.
Yeah.
And same with the finger on the answering machine. A pretty mundane thing turns into a finger dipping in blood, you know.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's really cool how they kind of make those contrasts.
Yeah, like we were saying, it blends. It's realistic. It's like these realistic situations with these terrible situations. It's trying to blend the two together, and I think it does a good job at that. And I think you nailed that on the head. There's also a transition kind of where it's like Abby is arguing with Ray at the front door, and this newspaper hits the door. It's like, all right, there's still reality. Like reality's still happening while all this crazy shit is also happening. Very interesting.
And I wanted to talk about that specific scene, because it struck me as super interesting, because you see the newspaper coming, and it hits the door with almost like a gunshot kind of sound. And is it Annie?
Abby.
Abby. Like gets startled and like almost screams, and Ray is just like stone faced, like doesn't even react. Which is like another like stark contrast of like how people are handling the situations that they're in, and like the difference between like their life pre this event and now in this, like, immersed in the crime.
Yeah, let's talk about Ray, John Getz's character, because he has a very interesting transition in this movie of basically, and it's, he thinks Abby has killed her husband, Julian Marty, Dan Hedaya's character, and he tries to cover it up, which is pretty insane, and like just makes things worse by dropping more and more blood on the ground. And again, adds to the realism of like, this guy doesn't know what the fuck he's doing. No, he doesn't know how to hide a body. Doesn't expect there to be all this blood on the ground. And he like gets him in the car. And it's this is all super intense because you have like people in the other room that could come in at any second. There's always that like, there's something just waiting around the corner to come into the situation. And that adds to the intensity. Yeah. And I think the viewer always knows what's going on, but the characters don't. You know what each character has done, and that adds to great storytelling and great stakes and great intensity and edge of your seat, thrilling action, and like that makes it's a great recipe for a great movie, in my opinion. And this movie does a great job of that.
And like not only knowing the circumstances, but the viewer knows like details. Like one of the like coolest moments or examples of this is when Ray is driving with the body and just throws his shirt in the incinerator, and like the previous scene was Marty saying, "Oh, there's an incinerator out back. Dump the bodies in the incinerator." And instead, Ray takes the body with him. To do what with? He probably has no idea. But that was such a good like, oh my god, this guy has no idea what he's doing kind of moment. And like it lends itself to this theme of these people that are just in over their heads and. Things just like the water level just keeps rising,
Yeah, and it rises even more when he's like gonna take him out of the car and he realizes he's not in there and he's still alive, and you get that epic shot of Julian crawling on the ground or like scurrying, trying to scurry away, but he's bleeding and almost dead, and like you don't know what Ray's going to do in this situation, and neither does the character, which is awesome because it's like, is he going to hit him with a shovel?
He tries like 3 different things to finish him off, and he can't do any of them. Yeah.
And then you get the truck coming, and he's like trying to get him in the car, which is super intense. And then he finally, digs a hole and buries him alive, but is about to, like, before he buries him, he's about to get shot with the gun. With Abby's gun, which is intense and like scary, and super entertaining and like awesome. It's a 13-minute sequence when it starts with him going to bury him, basically, from what I read. Let me see. It's famous body disposal scene lasts just over 13 minutes and contains no dialogue except for what is heard on the car radio, which is awesome. And like reading that when I was like looking at the trivia and stuff is mind-blowing because it's just like you're just sitting there like glued to the screen and you expect there to be like dialogue in this, but there's no dialogue, and I love scenes like that.
Well, and like one of the things that we talk about is putting a clock on something. And there's 2 major clocks in that sequence. One is the truck that's coming because he's got to get Marty out of the street and into the car before this truck can see that guy bleeding all over the road. And then the second one is actually him firing the gun unsuccessfully like two or three times.
3 times. Yeah.
And you know that there's 3 bullets, 2 of which have been fired.
Yes.
So you don't know when that last round is going to go off. And like, that's an unbelievable ticking clock, in my opinion. It's just such a great scene. And like, as the viewer, you know that bullet is still in there ready to go. And you're just like waiting for it to go off.
And you can almost see it in the chamber too, when it's like, you know, the cylinder is rotating. Super intense. And then he buries him alive, which is crazy. And I think that's when his character like finally loses it. And I think the sequence, like the scene right after that, epitomizes his character losing it and like being going nuts. And it's where the oncoming car is coming and flashing its lights at him, and then it's just a guy pointing his finger gun at him, and it's just like his mind's fucked.
Yeah.
And like that's such an amazing scene that's so simple yet complicated. And it's like, it just again lends to the character of just like Ray losing his mind over what he just had to do. Again, it's very, very realistic.
It's another, like, even as the viewer, you don't really know what's going on in that scene. You're almost in the same headspace as Ray, because like this car's coming and keeps flashing its lights at him, and you see Ray kind of like panicking because he's like, what the hell is going on?
It's
and then
the paranoia.
Yeah, right. Exactly. And then he figures it out, but then you get the guy with the finger gun who's like kind of looks like crazy too, you know?
Yeah.
And like, I think that's a great way to like show Ray's kind of break.
Yeah. His character break for sure.
Really well done. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. And the sound design is so great in this movie. It's so well done.
Yeah. Another like great use of gunshots in this movie. There's only a handful, and they're used extremely sparingly and meaningfully, which is not super common, and kind of hard to do sometimes. But every shot taken in this movie is very meaningful and impactful to the viewer, which is great. Because a lot of times there's just like millions of rounds fired in movies, and like it becomes meaningless, you know?
Yeah.
And like they do a really good job of making it very important every time a gun is fired in this movie.
And again, they limit you with those 2 to 3 bullets in the gun, you know?
Yeah.
So, like you said, like, so when the private investigator, Visser, shoots Dan Hedea's character, that shot's pretty, like, jarring. But you kind of know it's coming. Then you get where Ray kicks the gun, and that shot is like, whoa, what the fuck? And, like, you think he got shot.
Right, yeah.
And it's pretty intense. And then you get the scene where they are at Abby's apartment, and he's like, keep the lights off. That scene is so intense, too, because it's like, you know the sniper's there. Again, Ray thinks there's someone watching them, but he doesn't think he's going to get killed.
Yeah.
But yet the viewers know that the sniper's there, that the private investigator is there with this big rifle.
Which is like a great mismatch of expectations between Ray and the viewer. It's like Ray knows something's off, but he doesn't know that he's like about to get blown away. You know? And like the viewer knows like he's only got a little bit of time left. You know?
And you're like they almost like wait a little too long to get him shot. like
Yeah,
for him to get
100%.
shot. Which is you're like, oh, like is he gonna get shot?
There's like
Oh.
3 or 4 transitions back between Abby and Ray, and
Yeah.
you're like, okay, is this gonna be the time? And like
Yeah.
it is like maybe like 1 or 2 edits too long, and then
I
it
love
finally
that.
comes. Yeah,
Yeah, it's so
it's
good.
great.
And then she throws her shoe at the light bulb, which is genius. And then you get the final standoff, which is great. Her going across to the other window and then stabbing his hand to keep him stuck there, to keep the private investigator stuck there, is so awesome. And then he starts, shooting through the wall with his gun.
Yeah,
And it's like, I don't know why Abby just stands there, but it's just like, you're like, get out of the way. Like, what are you doing? It's like, there's so many times and instances that you almost like want to scream at the screen at these characters. But again, it's real. Like, these characters don't know what the fuck they're doing, which is, it's realistic, but it adds to the intensity. It adds to the storytelling. And I love that. Like, whenever I want to scream at the movie, like at the TV, that's awesome. I love that. Like, there's not a ton of movies that do that, and the movies that do are always usually pretty damn good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you get her shooting her last
real
bullet.
quick though.
Yeah.
This is one of those, like, usually when I think of the Coen Brothers, I think of their funnier movies. And I forget every once in a while how brutal some of their movies can be, and like the knife in
Dark
the hand
comedy.
and the window sill is like one of the more brutal things in their movies, but it's such a good moment. Like, it's just so well executed, and was a little jarring to me. I mean, like, it was, I mean, like, there's some pretty good, like, blood splatter in this movie, but, like, I wasn't particularly ready for the knife in the hand. I was like, whoa, like, yeah, I forgot that they can be pretty violent when they want to be.
Yeah, No Country for Old Men. That's, like, pretty violent.
Yeah.
Yeah, their violence is sometimes, like, very, like, whoa, like, unexpected.
Yeah.
But yeah, that set piece, that how that piece is designed and how he's reaching over to like, and just gets stabbed. It's so good. And then she shoots through the door the final bullet and it kills him. Apparently Joel Coen had trouble convincing M. Emmett Walsh to pick his hat up off the ground in the movie's climactic ending scene. Walsh had a laundry list of reasons why his character would not do such a thing, each of which Coen tried and failed to debate, apparently, which is pretty funny. After minutes of arguing on set, Coen asked Walsh, "Will you just humor me, please?" To which Walsh replied, I'm humoring you by doing this whole fucking movie." Which is awesome. That's so awesome. Because, like, I mean, he was really the only big name star. I mean, they wrote the movie for him. They wrote that role for him, which is pretty cool. But yeah, that's hilarious. He's such an awesome actor. And again, I can't wait to do Blade Runner with him. But yeah, so when Visser steals Abby's gun, it is shown that the revolver can hold 6 bullets and contains 3. All 3 bullets are fired later in the movie. 1 Visser to kill Marty. 1 bullet is fired when Ray accidentally kicks it. Then the final bullet is her killing Visser. The 3 empty rounds are fired by Marty when he's trying to shoot Ray before being buried, which also means that Ray was very lucky to kick the gun since Marty would have shot him otherwise.
Yeah.
So, again, pretty intense, and a lot of, like, almost like chance. All these things are chance, and it's all, again, it's the escalation. Yeah, I really enjoyed this movie. I love this movie. I love the Coen Brothers. We'll definitely have to do Raising Arizona.
Yeah.
I don't even know if it's on our list. We got to add it if we don't have it.
It's not on the schedule, but it's on the list.
Okay.
Yeah. The only other thing I wanted to talk about real quick is the PI, the private investigator in this movie, there's a few moments that were a little odd to me with him, and it mostly has to do with flies landing on his face. In the Volkswagen scene that we talked about a little bit ago, when they're talking about doing or planning the hit, there's a fly that's like crawling on his face through the entire scene, and then flies away at the end. And they even put in a buzzing sound effect so that it's like intentional, I think. And there's a later scene where there's a bug that kind of lands on him again.
Yeah, it's when he's in the office.
Yeah. And it made me think of like one of the other themes that's kind of consistent in their movies is some kind of stand-in for the devil character.
Yes.
And I think the private investigator is very much the prototype of that character. No Country for Old Men is like the most obvious one. But there's also John Goodman and Barton Fink.
Have you seen that? Did we watch that movie together?
Yeah, we watched that.
Yeah, that movie's awesome.
Who's like kind of like a devil. There's the I can't remember what he actually is. He's like a bounty hunter or something in Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, with the black glasses, and like he's always shown with like flames in the glasses.
Yeah.
That guy's kind of like this devil stand-in. Like a lot of their movies have this type of like evil character that like of like prods people in certain directions and is kind of like manipulating things, in certain ways. So yeah, he's the private investigator is definitely that in this movie. I think that's really cool to see like the first instance of it in like their movies. That was pretty neat.
I also think it lends to the like nothing bothers him.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, I'll kill them for you. And like just, obviously doesn't kill them and fakes them out, but kills Dan Hedaya. Like there's just like this lifelessness behind him that he doesn't care,
Yeah. And like he like has this like goofy kind of personality, but like you can tell that it's kind of a facade. Like
like the crawl from under a rock,
like on a dime, several times in the movie, and kind of like switches it on and off like very like rapidly. And like you can kind of tell that he's like not quite as like goofy as he seems to be. So
his character's awesome.
Really well made character.
Again, great directorial debut for these guys. I'm glad we did it. I'm glad you liked it. I knew you were gonna like it, so it's one of those movies. I'm ready for a movie that we both don't like, or we have contradicting, because we
haven't had one in a while. So,
and I feel like our list is it's all pretty good stuff coming up. So, speaking of which, we got Raiders of the Lost Ark next week, which I'm stoked for. Big Indiana Jones fan. So, if you guys watch that ahead of time so we can talk about it. But hope you guys enjoyed this episode. This is a great movie. We definitely recommend it. And thanks for listening.
Yep. See you next week.